Here's going guys. Jonathan, MMA Latest.com.
It's time to roll, baby.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to MMA Latest News. We're live here with Lance to recap Derrick Lewis versus Aleksei Oleinik at UFC Vegas 6. Almost said 5. It's very hot in the UK at the moment. Absolutely sweltering. Lance, what did you make of the weekend's fights back in Vegas, of course, and 1 week before UFC 252?
Yes, back in Vegas. Felt good to be back in Vegas. With the looming pay-per-view on the weekend, this upcoming weekend, we can almost forget about these fight cards popping up every week or so. With a fight headliner like Derrick Lewis and Oleinik, you have this recipe for weirdness, and it kind of set an expectation for the whole card. Sometimes when you have high expectations, the card cannot perform, and you have some fights and some performances that are kind of lackluster. But not this time. We had a very excellent card on this past Saturday. Really enjoyed myself watching this one.
Definitely, sometimes you can get a lot of almost feedback being like, why are we seeing heavyweights main event? We know that they're not great when it comes to their gas tanks, and they normally gas out after 1 or 2 rounds. But I think when you got someone so as explosive and exciting as the Black Beast and Derrick Lewis, who is also, a former title challenger, I think it rewards a main event. And Oleinik, was coming into this with some good wins under his belt. And, he could have very much pulled off the submission win in that first round. Just that really Lewis was very tough and pulled through.
Derrick Lewis is such a tough guy, and he's such a tough out for so many fighters. And Oleinik was pretty close in that first round with a couple submission attempts. He had a scarf hold locked up for like 2.5 minutes. He held onto that thing and then wrapped up in Americano toward the end of the round. Derrick Lewis survived it and took him out pretty early in the second round there. With the gas tank conversation, Derrick Lewis, he's gone 4.5 rounds with Mark Hunt and didn't look terrible. But toward the end of that fight, he did kind of gas out a little bit. But that was going on 3 years ago now, and Derrick Lewis has looked better since then. Again, with this fight, kind of a recipe for unpredictable results. But I think this one more or less played out the way that we thought it was going to play out. It was either going to be a first-round submission for Aleksei or a KO for Derrick Lewis at literally any other point in the fight. So it kind of played out that same way.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen, the Volkov fight is the one that sticks to memory, where we see Derrick Lewis, losing 2.5 rounds or even more and still coming away with a win. It's sort of incredible what he does, and he's so explosive. He had that back injury, didn't he, a year and a half ago, that stopped him really against Daniel Cormier and obviously Dos Santos, where he got TKO'd. But he's come back with a vengeance.
Yeah, that's 3 in a row now for Derrick Lewis, I believe. Yep, he fought Ivanov. He fought Latifi, and now he's taking out another Russian. And looking not that terrible doing it either. He's on a little bit of a roll here, and that does kind of beg the question, what's next for Derrick Lewis? And I think there's 2 fights that were kind of circling around for this big man. I don't know. Where do you see Derrick Lewis coming from this, Mitchell?
I think it's a tough one. Obviously, we're waiting to see what happens at UFC 252. Obviously, we've got the heavyweight title match on the line, the trilogy. Could we potentially see both those 2 walk off into the sunset, win or lose? I think, there's also talk this week about John Jones stepping in for the heavyweight title. It could be a very sticky one. We were expecting Ngannou to get that first title shot, which almost leaves Curtis Blades, and obviously we've got Junior Dos Santos versus Rosenstruck on that 252 card as well. So maybe the winner of that fight, preferably if it was Rosenstruck, that would be a fresh matchup for Derrick Lewis.
It would. I don't believe either of those men on the main card this Saturday, Dos Santos or Rosenstruck, would fill in for any injured fighter. Beg that question. I don't think that would be the case. But the winner of that one could be a fresh matchup for Derrick Lewis, especially if it's Rosenstruck, seeing as how he has already fought JDS and didn't do so hot in that fight. With the title being contested, it really brings everybody's conversation back around to whatever weight class is being talked about at that point, and at this time it's heavyweight. With these 2 champions, these two of the greatest heavyweights of all time, you almost forget about the activity going on in the rest of the weight class, given all the hype that's going into the headliner of this Saturday's pay-per-view. So with Derrick Lewis, he's kind of in a funny spot now, seeing as how he beat Ngannou in a one of those fights that, again, you can hype it up as much as you want, but as soon as the fight happens, you never know what's going to transpire. And that did transpire. That was 2 years ago now. Given that Ngannou holds that, given that Lewis holds that victory over Ngannou, you have to question, okay, well, does he fight him again? I don't think Dana White's necessarily enthusiastic about booking that rematch. And I know that someone has been very active on social media the past couple of days. That would be Curtis Blades, calling out Derrick Lewis and telling him, hey, buddy, take all the time you need to lose those 15 pounds that you want to lose. I'll be here waiting for you. And I don't hate that fight. I like that fight a lot. Derrick Lewis has this crazy ability, after being taken down, to just kind of roll over or stand up. He has that inhuman strength to just kind of do these spectacular things that you're not expecting. And so with a wrestler the caliber of Blades, I don't know if that's going to work so well. But it is, again, a fresh matchup for Derrick Lewis, seeing as how Derrick Lewis now holds the heavyweight knockout record, right? And he's fought a majority of this weight class. So I like that fight against Blades.
100%. I think if we just take a quick look at the heavyweight rankings, obviously we've got Miocic and Cormier this weekend, the trilogy, the rivalry ends there. Ngannou is a tough one because Ngannou has defeated everyone below him other than Derrick Lewis, which, was a fight that was a boring fight, so to speak. I would be interested to see the rematch just because 2 years has passed and we've got an Ngannou who's full of confidence. Mm-hmm. Again, if I'm Derrick Lewis, I'm saying, no, I've already beaten him. I don't need to fight that monster again. And obviously Ngannou wants the title fight. Should he fight Derrick Lewis and lose, he then loses that opportunity right underneath his feet.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope for Francis Ngannou if he takes any other fight other than a title fight. And I don't think that he needs to. I think that given his resume of late and the fashion that he's finished these fights, I don't believe he needs to wait and take another fight to get his shot at the championship. I know that his fight against Stipe was, again, more lackluster from him, seeing his record of violence. But time has passed. That was January 2018. So here it is 2.5 years later. We have a different situation now with Ngannou. He looks better. He looks even more aggressive than he did before, which is somehow crazy to speak of. So it really kind of depends. This whole weight class depends on how this weekend's fight goes. And whether, one man or both men retire at the end of it.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, we've got, I think, Lewis and Blades is the only one there that doesn't really have a fight, so to speak. Obviously, we saw their DeSantis and Rosestruck 5th and 6th. We've got Miocic and Cormier at number 1 and 2, and I'd imagine Ngannou would be then willing to step into that title shot. But I guess you could question, obviously, Lewis said he wants to come back in December. But, Curtis Blades, he had a good win against Volkov. I think that is the fight to make, but you just have to question how long they're out for. And if they come back in November, December, is the talk of them a little bit cold? Is it because, if things go... And could we see maybe DC almost be tempted with a bit, we saw it, Dana White and I believe his coach, Javier Mendez, said, if you give him enough money, he might be willing to take one more fight.
But would that fight be against a top contender? Or would that fight be against someone else coming up a weight class who has a history with Daniel Cormier?
It would be interesting, wouldn't it? And I don't really want to see it in Ngannou versus DC. I think that would be a scary matchup for both competitors. And I think, you see it a lot of these times where these fighters come back and go, I want one more win before I retire. If DC wins this title, he's heavyweight champion of the world 2 times. He's, arguably the greatest heavyweight of all time. So he's beaten the consensus greatest heavyweight of all time, who's defended the belt the most times. But then again, he'd also be on 2 defenses, I believe. Or he's very close, isn't he? So it'd be interesting to see what he does. But I would, we don't want to see someone continuing to build up a 5 or 6 losing streak, known as a legend, and almost wimp out the game. We want to see DC, if he wins that title on Saturday night, to walk away into the sunset as a heavyweight champion.
That would be the perfect outcome for DC. And I don't think that he needs to take any more fights after that. I think he's done everything he needs to do at that point. He's been the light heavyweight champion, and now he's the 2-time heavyweight champion, hypothetically, if he wins. I don't think he needs to do anything else after that. Now, Stipe is another question. Stipe, if he loses and Daniel Cormier wins and retires, well, then the belt's vacant again. What does Stipe do? He's the top contender. If he's a former champion, who do you match him up with? I guess it's got to be Ngannou, right? What do you do at that point? Really interesting equation being worked out here this weekend, and I'm very excited to see what happens.
Definitely. I think it'd also be difficult almost, although Miocic will be on there on merit and what he's done in the UFC, it's almost hard to see him go back in there on the back of the loss, even though he is champion. at the moment, it would be interesting to see maybe like the dream match for me at the moment is Ngannou Jones. Now, how you get to that matchup is a number of different ways. Whether Miocic wins, gets John Jones, say he wins the title, then you get John Jones and Ngannou. That would be a pretty much a dream matchup. I'd probably more Ngannou coming to that as a challenger because it almost builds him up a little bit more. Especially if he beats John Jones, that's the fight we need to see at the end, probably the end of next year, perhaps.
Ideally.
100%, 100%. We'll have a look at a little bit of the striking. It wasn't a great first round in terms of the striking. It was more Oleinik taking it to the ground. You see there 3 strikes out of 7 landed, 2 significant strikes, 1 takedown apiece. But you see the busier man was Derrick Lewis on the feet, and he got it done with that vicious knee and the ground and pound to finish up in that, straight into the second round almost.
Yeah, and the knee almost didn't even land clean to Oleinik's face. It landed in his chest and knocked him down, and then therefore Derrick Lewis was able to hit him with that meat hammer that he has hit so many people with to finish the fight. Not a very eventful fight in terms of stand-up, but the ground exchanges were kind of interesting because Derrick Lewis, again, finding a way to just kind of roll around, avoid things. He did find himself in a very tough spot at the end of that first round there with a couple submission attempts, but he's a weird dude. He's a weird, slippery dude, and he's hard to finish. I know DC got him, but not a lot of people can finish that guy. So.
Yeah, and he also went into that fight with a back injury, didn't he, I believe? So, and that was DC's game plan. He took him down, laid him out flat on his spine, and it became a one-way affair. But on another day, that fight could have gone an almost different way with the power of Derrick Lewis.
Yeah, and any fight can go any different number of directions. It all depends on who shows up on the day of the fight, who looks better, who had the right preparation, or just who lands the lucky shot. And that that's kind of the case with the first Stipe DC fight. Who landed the lucky shot, who got poked in the eyeball. So.
Yeah, the second one you could say as well, because obviously Miocic got slammed pretty hard in that first round, and DC became a little bit complacent and he tired out as that fight went on. But you could have arguments to say that should have been 2-0 and done and dusted in that rivalry. In that fight.
There's an argument made for that, definitely. But again, fight happens how it happens. Yeah.
And as you mentioned there, we've seen that a specific fighter be on the wrong end of some decisions. Well, I say decisions. He's been knocked out a couple of times on what would be, you'd imagine, leading scorecards is Chris Weidman. He came back this weekend, former middleweight champion, and he got a very good win, a very professional win, and a very experienced one. It wasn't the most thrilling one to watch, but he got the job done knowing that he had to get a win because he wasn't such a big losing streak. What do you make of that?
Yeah, he came out, did a very much a blue-collar performance. Came out, did his job. He out-wrestled Akhmedov, who himself is an accomplished Dagestani wrestler, and kind of showed glimpses of the Chris Weidman that we've seen before, the Chris Weidman who was world champion at one point, number 2 pound fighter in the UFC. And we recall Weidman as this super dynamic striker, grappler, mixed martial artist. You remember when he knocked out who was it with the lead-in elbow 2012? I forget who he knocked out. This versatile, dynamic striker and grappler, all-American wrestler. And he runs into Luke Rockhold. He runs into Yoel Romero. He runs into some bad fights. Everybody has these ups and downs in their careers, and Chris has been trying really hard to get back on that horse. And he looked good on Saturday. He looked pretty good. Not the most impressive fight, I'm not going to lie, but he looked like Chris Weidman.
Yeah, 100%. I think, the fight against Romero back at UFC 205, you could argue that he was winning until he got, unfortunately, kneed in the face, as Romero did. That was a vicious knockout. That was the first time I'd watched the UFC event and seeing poor Chris Weidman there, And then you see Jacare, he was winning those first 2 rounds. He was probably winning the 3rd round, but again, ended up with a knockout loss on his record. And then he went up to light heavyweight, went after Dominic Reyes, who we now know, having seen him against John Jones, know how good he is. Do you think there could have been any problems, maybe perhaps with the weight cut going back down to 185? Because there was questions of him looking gassed in that 2nd round.
He looked a little tired. It could have been the new weight cut, seeing as how this is his first time going back down to 185 in a while now. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. I think it could have been the weight cut, or it could have been just nerves. He had a lot riding on this fight. He had a lot of pressure on his shoulders to get the win here. Being the former world champion, being who he is, and the resume he has at middleweight. It could be any number of factors that have led to that kind of a strange cardio problem there. But he did win. And now, looking at the updated rankings, he's now number 11 in the world again. He's right back up there. So
yeah, because obviously he wasn't in the rankings before that fight, and I did make this graphic before they got announced. We look at the top 6. There's a lot of talk with him facing former champions. This one, it's difficult because Chris Weidman is a former champion, but I'd almost be not pained watching any of these just because I feel like we've got a new breed of middleweights, and I feel like he's in that legacy group of legends. I'd rather see him maybe fight. There's talk about a Luke Rockhold rematch, or maybe an Anderson Silva. Some of we've got this legacy, legendary match. Even if you put Jacare in there again, there's something with the old breed that I'd rather see them almost stick together rather than seeing maybe a Darren Till versus Chris Weidman, so to speak.
I think you'd have a hard time having him stay off of these higher fights, these higher profile fights. Chris is a competitor. He's a fighter. He wants to be world champion again. But I do see your point, and I really like a Luke Rockhold rematch. They tried to rebook that rematch for Madison Square Garden a couple years ago, and it didn't fell through. Luke Rockhold had some problem, and then that's how the Jacare fight happened. And Lucas talked about coming back in the past couple of days. I think that'd be a great fight for both guys. Chris now, he's a top 12 middleweight in the world again, and Luke Rockhold, the first guy to kind of knock him off that horse when he was the champion. So I think that'd be a pretty solid fight for both guys to kind of get back on there in a rhythm there fighting. And in terms of Anderson Silva, I don't know what he's doing. I know that he had that really bad fight against Cannonier last year, and we haven't really heard much from him since. But in terms of legacy fights and legacy fighters, those three, they could be matched up at any point. I would certainly watch it.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know whether it's because I came into sport rather recently, where I've not seen those original fights, so I almost want to see it fresh again, just to say that I've seen it. And I think maybe we can see, Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman are in a very similar situation coming in. They tried to go up to light heavyweight, didn't work out for them. Former great champions who have some great wins in their records, but recent times has almost tainted that. And, the memories of the fans are ones seeing them getting knocked out rather than seeing them getting their hand raised. It's kind of unfortunate.
It's an unfortunate short-term memory with MMA fans. I mean, with anybody who watches the sport, you recall the last couple of performances, and that's what the narrative turns into. You can even hear the commentary talking about how he's had a rough stretch, but they always kind of go back to mention that he was a champion or he did do these things beforehand. But it's unfortunate that we forget who these people were not that long ago, right? Chris Weidman, number 2 pound fighter in the UFC as of 2012, 2013, sometime in that point. So not that long ago in terms of years, but the sport's cruel. And it's cruel to your body. It's cruel to your ego. And now that's 7 years ago now. And Chris Weidman, I don't recall how old he is. I think he's 36.
Yeah,
but
which in terms of you'd say that isn't old, but for the career that Chris Weidman had, especially the damage he's taken in his last 5 or 6 fights, there's a lot of miles on that clock for him now.
Yeah. And we talk about the careers of Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman. They're kind of identical. They former champions, suffer a trio of pretty bad knockout losses, and then have one victory sprinkled in there between the most recent events. And now at one point they're both kind of MIA. You didn't see Chris Weidman around too much, and you haven't seen Luke Rockhold since his fight against Jan Blachowicz last summer. Kind of crazy how the stars align for these guys when they fight each other, and how this whole division is so strange right now, especially with who the champion is and the caliber of champion that he is. I don't know if I could see any of those two guys being a title challenger again at any point, but you can't forget about what they have done and who they are in terms of the legacy and the timeline of the sport.
100%. You say that about the narrative. 2-3 months ago, we were probably calling for both Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman to retire. 2 days after the fight, we're asking to see them fight each other once more. It's a very short world and a very short window of opportunity that we build ourselves. Now we're looking, 2 former champions fighting in a renowned rematch that the fans want to see in November, December. It's a crazy game. It is a crazy game.
Crazy game.
Also, one good fighter that had a good win this weekend was Dariush, of course. Opened the main card against Scott Holtzman. Unfortunately missed weight, but what a spinning I guess elbow it was. It was more of a forearm, but the spinning technique nonetheless hit flush in the face, and it was fantastic to see. Almost deserving of the performance of the night bonus, but unfortunately because he missed weight, he wasn't eligible to get it. What did you make of him this weekend?
Oh my goodness. Paul Felder leaped out of his chair when that happened, and so did I. I love Dariush, and I love watching him fight. He's a kind of a dark horse in that division still. He was being the dark horse in that division for a long time up until he ran into Edson Barboza's knee. And then we kind of stopped talking about Dariush, and then he got that strange knockout loss against Alexander Hernandez. And he had that funny draw against Evan Dunham, and he kind of fell off the radar for a lot of people. But now he's won 5 in a row. 4 of those finishes, one of which is against Drew Dober. He's looked sensational. All of a sudden he's this knockout proficiency man, and he said in his post-fight interview, I didn't used to be like this, or something similar to that. He's even surprised himself as to his finishing ability lately. He's my favorite style of fighter. He's got the solid grappling, he's got fantastic striking, and some pretty good cardio. And I'll watch this guy fight any of the top 10 lightweights at this point. I think now, as of the rankings updates, he's back up at number 11 or number 12. He's looking fantastic.
Yeah, that's the number for him. And I remember seeing a clip of him saying that he was asked to do it because I think it was his son or a friend say that they do it all the time in a video game. And coming off that flush in real life, it must, it's kind of funny how that happens in the sport.
Yeah. You might not expect the things to land. You don't expect, you try every tactic you have, you try every method of victory. And sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't work. But for Dariush recently, he's done exceptionally well just making it work somehow. So he's just very lucky.
Definitely. And, there's many times we've seen that be tried and the person pulling it off or the fighter pulling it off ends up with a broken forearm and then spends 6 months on the sideline. We see it with Paige Van Zandt. He's broken her arm a couple of times trying those sort of techniques. And, fortunately it worked this time. Another impressive fight was Darren Stewart. Got happened to represent the London ends from there, from East London, of course. He looked phenomenal. There was a little bit of just a bit of nerves, as you always get with the UK fighters, especially from us as myself. But what did you make of Darren Stewart? He got it done pretty quickly, didn't he?
He did, and with a was it a modified guillotine? I think he got him with. Yes, he looked really good. Especially coming off that kind of bizarre fight against Fabinski in that Cage Warriors cross promotion strangeness that happened in March. He was fighting a grappler in that fight, and he didn't do so well. Could be any number of factors as to why that fight wasn't fantastic for him. But he comes back and he fights Maki Patolo, who's an up-and-coming middleweight contender, all of a sudden, and gets a finish. He's still looking fantastic. He's 29 years old. He's had some difficult fights in the UFC. I'm thinking in particular that split decision loss to Edmund Shabazian not that long ago. And he could be in the spot that Shabazian is in now if he had won that fight. So I was really impressed with Darren Stewart, and I think that he still has a lot to do in this middleweight division.
100%. And, he's very emotional in that post-fight Octagon interview, saying, he lost his good friend and his trainer. It's always sad seeing. You always, sometimes when those things happen, a fighter can almost, it makes or break a fight. They can take that into the cage and be overly aggressive, or it can be, something that makes them push that extra 10% and win the fight. It is a really special thing to see. And I think that's, coming up to Khabib versus Gaethje, I think that's the almost what we're expecting to see. Is Khabib coming back too soon, or is it going to be something that really drives them on? It's always a tough one when you lose a close one, isn't it? And then you've got to step in the cage on 6 weeks, 7 weeks notice.
Yeah, it really depends on who the fighter is and how they feel comfortable going forward after a loss of someone close. I can't imagine what that feels like going to the octagon and fighting. But for some people, it's cathartic. For some people, they just need time away. And I'm not sure the situation with Khabib, what it's going to be like come September. September. Or is it October?
October, yeah, 2-5.
October, yeah. That'll give him some time, and he hasn't fought since the Dustin Poirier fight, so this loss is still fresh. But I don't want to say I'm excited to see what he looks like because it's everything that he's gone through, but I'm intrigued as to what happens in that with him.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I mentioned arguably my fight of the night, just because of what went on, was Kevin Holland versus Buckley. Buckley coming in from LFA fighting just a week before the event. Came in on very short notice. Obviously, Kevin Holland, had a couple fights in recent times being cancelled on him. He was meant to fight the week before against Trent Giles, who unfortunately had a medical he couldn't fight on medical grounds because he fainted at the arena. And I hope he's pulling through that and on good health again. But yeah. Kevin Holland, great trash talker in the octagon, and he brought it with him. But Buckley also impressed me that night.
Yeah, Buckley didn't look like a slouch in there. He didn't. He was throwing heat. He was staying on top of Holland. He was trying his best to close the distance. But Holland is so good at moving around, and making you feel bad as he's escaping your punches. He's really good at changing the dynamic of the cage, not just necessarily in the movement and where he's at, but like in terms of what you're hearing, because you're hearing your corner, his corner, the commentary team, and him at the same time. And he's really weird at making the noises different, which is kind of a new dynamic in the sport. I'm not sure how many people are going to adapt in cage dialogue with their opponent. I wouldn't recommend it, unless you're Kevin Holland, of course. But I think at one point he was giving him pointers as to where to hold his hands or how to throw punches, kind of reminiscent of that Max Holloway Brian Ortega fight. So I really enjoyed watching him. He looked like he was just 5 steps ahead of Buckley the entire time. But Buckley, I don't know if he'll get a longer contract after this or if this was a one-time thing. But he's got some potential. He's a young guy. I think he's only 28. Yeah, he's fine. I wouldn't worry about him.
Yeah, I'd like to see him again. I thought there was almost 10% of me was hoping that Buckley would get the knockout because Kevin Holland was talking so much to him. It's one of those fights where you can see it going horribly wrong. Buckley was looking to land the shots. You saw the referee a couple of times telling him almost to shut up and be respectful to each other. But Kevin Holland kept giving it everything he did, and he got a fantastic knockout in that third round. But for me, that was fight of the night just because of what went on between the two. And obviously, I think he got a performance of the night bonus to that, didn't he?
He did. Yep. He did, as did Darren Stewart, and hold on, I have the list pulled up here.
I imagine Derrick Lewis must have been close to getting one.
No, actually, it was Andrew Sanchez, Darren Stewart, Gavin Tucker, and Kevin Holland. Gavin Tucker, our young Canadian stud who has not fought as often as we would like him to, also looked fantastic in his performance against Justin James coming off that giant knockout of Frank Camacho not that long ago. So again, fighters come in at different levels. Fighters come in at different levels of preparedness, different outcomes for every fight. And it's arbitrary to keep saying this, but you can never really know what to expect when you step in there. So Gavin Tucker looking excellent, and I do want to make one honorable mention for our man Andrew Sanchez, former Ultimate Fighter winner, who had all the hype in the world coming into his UFC career. He had that win over Khalil Roundtree. He was looking very exceptional. And just kind of ran into some bad times. He ran into Anthony Smith, who's now a light heavyweight, Brian James, who I believe is retired. And then got 2 good wins against Marcus Perez and Marc-Andre Barriault, and then bumped into Marvin Vettori as of recently. But he's lost against some solid competition. I wouldn't put anything past Andrew Sanchez at this point, especially how he looked on Saturday with that kind of funny new karate striking stance he hasn't really shown too much in the past. Excellent movement, excellent jabs, excellent feints. He looked really good. So I don't mention Andrew Sanchez, Dirty Sanchez.
Definitely. It's all in the mullet, isn't it? I think that was the main takeaway from that. You got Tanner Buzzer fighting a couple of weeks ago, getting the win. I think the mullet, everyone seems to, won't be expecting the next card. Everyone had their mullets coming out. But I think, as you said there, it's interesting. Obviously, we've been back in the small cage for a little while. Really interesting to see Lewis versus Oleinik in that bigger cage on Fight Island. I think we could have seen a lot different of a fight because obviously Derrick Lewis has got more range to cover. And it's going to be interesting that first card back when there's fans let in the arena. It's going to be such a weird experience getting used to that again. Mm-hmm. Especially 6 or 7 months after no fans. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear that white noise of the crowd again. And I know the fighters are missing it dearly. I know Sean O'Malley mentioned recently that he had a deep loss fighting in these empty octagons. He feeds off the crowd energy, and a lot of fighters do. And for other fighters, they kind of like this cerebral silence of fighting in a small cage with nobody watching. So different styles for different fighters, but I would like to see the fans back. It just adds different energy.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'd be interesting to see what the Contender Series. It'd be interesting to see any statistics in terms of fighters who fought the Contender Series and tough in this recent period, if they've won more or lost more. So obviously they're used to more that environment, especially those who've already fought in the Apex coming through the Contender Series recently. I think Sean O'Malley was in the Apex, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Also, used to that sort of arena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have to look at their records recently as all the Contender Series alumni. I know that we had a couple. Yusuf Zalal, I believe, was a Contender Series alumni. Was he from LFA? I think it was from LFA. But anyway, they seem to be doing pretty comfortably in these small cages because they're used to it. and Andrew Sanchez coming out to open fight. That was a while ago, but didn't look out of home or out of place in this fight.
Definitely. We're just seeing from the group chat some breaking news. Yoel Romero is out of this fight against Uriah Hall. Could have a big indication on the middleweight division, of course. Chris Weidman, does he want to step in short notice against Uriah Hall, perhaps? It's one of those ones. Edmund Shabazian, if he's not too injured, if he's not hurt, he can come back and get a quick win. But, that is a disappointing one to see. Seeing the return of Romero is always fun. But
yeah. Word of advice for anybody watching, if you're an MMA fan, don't get too excited before the fight card. Don't make lists. Don't do these preview shows like we're doing. Just wait till Saturday and watch the fight card because you never know what's going to happen. We lost Gerald Mearshart versus Ed Herman last 2 weeks ago because of COVID, like 3 hours before the fight. We lost Trevin Giles like 15 minutes before his fight. You never know until they're in the octagon. But who's going to fight Uriah Hall now? What's Marvin Vettori up to?
That's a good shout. I think the group chat just said Kevin Holland obviously had a good win. Could he return back? He had a fight missed out the week before. Could get 2 paychecks in very quick succession. Another fighter who wants to fight in middleweight is Khamzat Chimaev. Do you stepping in there at middleweight, or is that maybe a little too soon? Are we getting too built up in the hype train? I just want to see him fight in there again. He's incredible.
I just want to see him fight. I don't care who he fights. I just want to see him fight. I do think the hype train's going really quick right now. We need to kind of put the brakes on just a smidge. But Uriah Hall's got such a funny. He's one of those guys with that funny movement, that incredibly powerful kicks, incredibly powerful striking. I don't know if Weidman will be a good fit for that fight right now at this point. But you ask him, he'd be all for it. So whatever he wants to do. I don't know who they're going to do. I would love to see Marvin Vettori hop in there though. He's on such a streak. He's on such a good streak right now. I think he'd be an excellent replacement. But I don't even know if he's in town.
Yeah, just looking at the rankings, he is at number 9 in the rankings. You obviously got Kelvin Gastelum's in and around that. Akhmedov lost. Brad Tavares, Marvin Vettori and probably Cannon Holland are probably 2 of the best shouts early on going into that one. But again, it's an interesting matchup. And I'm sad to see because obviously Uriah Hall, if he beats Romero, that's a big win on his resume.
Yeah, he can't be too happy right now knowing that's off the table for him. I wonder what Darren Till's doing.
He's got his. I wonder if he can. Obviously, his knee's in a brace at the moment. But
that's true. I did forget about that.
I mean, I'm sure if you offered him the fight, it'd be well up
in there. Yeah, 100%.
right now.
Yeah, Uriah Hall's not a bad win on anybody's resume though. Anybody that hops in there, they got a big opportunity. Uriah Hall, I think he's on a 2-fight win streak himself. You gotta be careful about who he picks as well. But that's next weekend, I believe, the 22nd.
Yeah, exactly soon. Maybe do give him Kelvin, because obviously Kelvin only went a minute 30 with Jack Hermanson, got heel hooked. So he didn't take too much damage in terms of, he didn't go through a 15-minute walk. And it's a good fight.
Maybe if they do it at a catch weight, 190 or something, they might be able to save that fight or keep Hall in the card if they're going to throw somebody else in, especially Kelvin, who, no offense to Kelvin, has some problems with his weight in the past. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's almost a good place to wrap it up. I'm going to ask you one more question. Who's your fighter of the week? If you had to pick one fighter of the week from this weekend, who would it be?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. I think my fighter of the week is going to be Beneil Dariush. I think he went out and did exactly what we hoped he would do against a guy like Scott Holtzman. No offense to Scott Holtzman, very durable, but somehow Beneil manages to finish guys recently, and he's on this 5-fight win streak. He had the perfect opportunity to call out Paul Felder, but he didn't because he's not that kind of guy. He's going to fight whoever they put in front of him. Obviously, we'd like to see him facing some top 10 competition next. But he's such a nice guy. He's such a legitimate character, and I love watching his fights, and I think he's my fighter of the week.
100%. I'm hoping we see him back in the cage very soon because, as you said, he's a great fighter to watch, and he's one of those now that you could probably see pushing in that top 10, top 8. He's really looking for that level of opponent now. But yes, it's been great talking to you, Lance. Always a pleasure, seeing you on the channel, of course. And also, we're building up to UFC 252. The trilogy is here, and of course, the Sugar Show co-main events. We're going to be covering all that this week, of course. So make sure to stay tuned to that. I think we're going to have a who's the greatest heavyweight in UFC history debate coming out either tomorrow or Thursday. So make sure to hit subscribe for that, of course. And we'll see you guys on the next video.